talking about the Constitution, but they never talk about the limited aspect of it.
All right, let me read that clause to you. Again, this is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Now, it starts out that says, Congress shall have power to, and then it moves down to here. It says, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such a district not exceeding 10 miles square, as may by session of a particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of government of the United States. So let me stop there. That's about halfway through. Does anyone recognize what that 10-mile square is that they're talking about?
District of Columbia.
Washington, D.C. Okay, so we said Congress shall have exclusive legislation. In other words, they have complete power over this district. We give them that 10-mile square for the seat of government. All right, now let's go on. And to exercise like authority over all places, now here's the kicker here, purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be. Okay, so in other words, now we're talking about a state here. So if they want land within a state, it says they have to do what? They have to purchase it, and they have to get the state legislature's consent. But it doesn't stop there. It says, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Okay, in other words, they can purchase land with the state legislature consent for those 5 reasons, no other. So then let me ask you, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, Forest Service, monuments, recreation areas, wildernesses, okay, do any of these fit that bill? Does the federal government have constitutional right to own land within a state except for what's written here? Okay. The only other place that it talks about land within, well, for the federal government is in Article 4, which talks about territories. The federal government does not own territories, but they have the right to control them until that they can be turned into states. Once a state enters the Union, it enters in upon equal footing with the original 13 states. That's also in Article 4. Did the original 13 states have federal land in them? They didn't, because the federal government didn't even exist when they started. They were an entity unto themselves. Each state, colonies if you would call them, but once they gained their independence from England, they were 13 separate countries. Now, evidence of this is in the treaty, the peace treaty that basically ended the Revolutionary War. It was signed by 14 states. The 13 states were obvious. Who was the 14th state? Does anyone know who the 14th state that signed the treaty that brought peace after the Revolutionary War? Anyone have an answer for that? It was the state of Great Britain. All right? So if you understand the definition of a state, look it up in your dictionaries, whatever. The definition of a state is the exact same as the definition of a nation. Okay? And the terms are often back and forth a little bit. So that treaty was signed by 14 states, and it lists them. I've actually seen it. I wish I had a copy of it to show you. But it was signed by the state of Great Britain. Okay? Now, we in America have almost been trained to believe that a state is nothing more than a district. In fact, that's what the BLM, they don't call it the state of Nevada, they call it the District of Nevada. I don't know if you realize that, but they don't recognize statehood. They call it a district. Or in Canada, they're called provinces. Okay? A province is not the same definition as a state. A state, yeah, I got stuck there earlier today too. A state is a much greater status and entity than a province or a district, okay? And so technically, if you want to listen to or figure out what the United States is, okay, think of the word union. Is union a thing of one? Okay, can I be united with myself? Okay, no. But you guys are all here together united with me right now.
Betcha.
Okay, so a union is a group of many. Okay, now we're one group, so I guess we're one under that deal, but without many, it can't be a union. Okay, so we are the United States. Okay, it's not one. We're not, quite honestly, and I'll probably get media backlash for this statement too. When I say the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't say one nation under God. I say 50 nations under God. United, or I say 50 nations united under God. Okay? We're still united, we're still one. I still love the United States of America, but I do recognize the individual entity of each state.
Exactly.
Okay? The sovereignty is the key word there, that's right.
So does really the government, the BLM, has the real deed of this land, that it's the owner of this land?
No, I don't believe that. In fact, that's the crux of part of our message, is that the BLM does not own it. Now, they're claiming ownership because of the Enabling Act of Nevada. I could explain that to you. You want me to explain?
Yeah.
Every state that has entered the Union, except for the original 13 states. So even the states that came in that were further back east, the west of the Allegheny Mountains, and you know, they were part of the Northwest Territories originally, and then the Louisiana Purchase became territories, and they became states. And then there was the Western lands, which came in after the Mexican-American War and through the Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo. Okay, these were kind of the three major land acquisitions of the United States. Every state that entered the Union had what they called an Enabling Act. Part of the Enabling Act was to clear the title so that there wasn't any clouded title. Just like when you buy a house, you got to have title insurance, and it goes through a process to make sure there's no liens or etc. against it. And title, so when it becomes a state, there's nothing holding it back. Okay. In the Enabling Acts, and every single one of them are almost worded identically, it says that as a territory, and there's a key part there, okay, it doesn't say as a territory, but they are a territory at this point. A territory is different from a state. A territory is like an adolescent. What it does as an adolescent doesn't count when it becomes an adult. All right, so consider that in mind, that a territory is an adolescent. But in the Enabling Act, it says, we forever disclaim all title to this land. Okay? That forever is up when it becomes a state, because now it's left its adolescence, and now it's a different entity. It's no longer a territory, it's now a state. All right? But that's what they do, is they disclaim all the rights, all the land forever, so that they have clear title. And then once it becomes a state, according to Article 4, it enters in upon equal footing, and all the land belongs to the state, not the territory, the state. Okay? And then the state then will go back and recognize all the private properties, go back and recognize all the rights, and you know, that's where our grazing rights and stuff come in and so forth. Okay? In all the states up, you know, through the Northwest Territories and the Louisiana Purchase, everything was honored properly. I need to back up one more deal. The federal government never owned that land, okay? But when it becomes into the state, all the unappropriated lands, the federal government would act as a caretaker, but the word a trustee. Okay, a trustee. Say like a child, parents die when he's young, he inherits a house. Well, he's not 18, he's not an adult. That's put into a trustee. The trustee handles the estate until he becomes an adult, and then it's given to him, you know, according to the will or whatever the case might be. So in this case, the federal government acts as a trustee. They don't own the land. The trustee don't own the house. Okay, the house belongs to the state and the people, like the land does, and the trustee had obligation to dispose of that land. Okay, and that's where we see like the Homestead Act and different things like that going on. Okay, that's all kind of that part of that disposal, but they have no right to hold it. Okay, now in these western states, that disposal never took place. Okay, they still don't own it. They are illegally holding it in trust against the will of the true owners, which is us. Okay, so that's what's going on. Now the BLM claims they own it, Federal government claims they own it, and that's just not constitutionally correct.
Do you? It's still a territory what they're saying they own, right?
That's right. Okay, again, back to some of those laws. The federal government makes all the rules concerning a territory. That's in Article 4. Okay? In other words, a person that lives in a territory is not guaranteed his constitutional rights. He is not guaranteed the Bill of Rights. Now, they might allow him to, have this right or that, but they're not. A person in a territory is not guaranteed the rights. Once it becomes a state, then they are. So you can see why they don't want to recognize us as a state, because they would have to recognize our grazing rights, because they are protected by state law. They would have to recognize your First Amendment rights. Remember what they did up there? They put your First Amendment areas up there. Why do you think they can get away with that? Because if it's treated like a territory, you don't have that right. Okay, when they arrested my brother down here on the road, okay, he was off the white line, and he was just like you guys are, just like this guy. He had his cell phone in one hand, and he had his iPad in the other, and he's videoing. Okay, I was right next to him, not further than he was away. And I had 4 snipers with and I looked at them binoculars, looked right down their scopes, right down their barrels. And he had 20 other agents come. And this is all he's doing. And they jump him and tear him to the ground and drive his face into the gravel with their knees. And why? Because they said they told us, you have no right except you be in those protest areas. That was their words. Under territorial law, you have no rights until we become a state. So this is why our message to our governor is. Now I'll tell you about my other brother. He made a phone call to the Nevada State Governor's office. Now he didn't speak with the governor, so I'll catch him a little break right there. But he spoke with a gal in the office there. And the gal says, the governor doesn't have any authority in the state of Nevada. He's like, let me clean out my ear. He goes, I want to make sure I heard that right. So you're telling me that he's the governor of the state of Nevada and he has no authority over the control of the state of Nevada? And she's like, that's correct. And he's like, I need to clean out my other ear. That just doesn't sound right. So he's like, all right, Nevada has a boundary, it has a shape. Everything within that state is Nevada's, right? And he is the governor, correct? He is the governor. But you're saying he has no authority within the state. She goes, that's correct. He has no authority within the state. Okay? Why would that be? The only way that would be is because it's still being treated as a territory. Now, in 1864, on October 31st, what happened? President Lincoln declared Nevada a state, did he not? I've read that. I've read the speech. He declared it a state. If he declared it a state, and if it's truly a state, then it had to enter upon equal footing with the original 13 states, which means all of this land belongs to the state and their people, which means the Enabling Act, that forever, ended at that point. This is our battle. We believe that Nevada is a state. We believe that this land belongs to the people and is to be controlled by the people closest to the government closest to the people, which is the county. And we believe that our rights are protected by state law, and we have not broken any laws here on this ranch. And we're in complete compliance with the Constitution, the supreme law of the land.
Yeah!
Yeah.
Yeah!
I would add that in Article 4, the United States shall maintain for the states a republican form of government.
That is right. And that is part of the guarantee. Okay? A lot of us have been taught that we live in a democracy. Okay? What does the Pledge of Allegiance say? And to this republic for which we stand. Okay? You will not find where it speaks about a democracy anywhere in our founding documents. Okay, a democracy is mob rule.
The rule of men.
Yeah.
The rule of men. A republic is based upon principles. Principles. And the principles of freedom and liberty are espoused in this Constitution. And a Republican form of government is supposed to protect those principles.
Why your father stopped paying in '93 to the feds? That's.
Do they own the land? Should we be paying to them?
But before that, he was paying, right?
All right. Are we not all ignorant at one time or another?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay,
Agree,
we had to
absolutely.
learn. We had to learn.
Yes.
And once we learned, then we stopped.
Thank you.
Well, let me explain what this grazing fee, because everybody keeps bringing this grazing fee up and they want to paint us as though we dodge taxes and that we're freeloaders and so forth. The grazing right, okay, was established by putting the feed, the water, into beneficial use. Okay, beneficial use means our animals ate the feed and they drank the water, and now man can use that because it creates red meat. We can utilize that. It's beneficial to man. Okay, so that's how the right was created. Now the grazing right existed before BLM ever existed. Okay, so BLM now comes into existence, and interestingly enough, one of their mission statements was to protect these rights. How could they protect these rights if they didn't already exist? They acknowledged that they did exist, and that was part of their mission statement, to protect them. Now, the grazing fee, this is how it was divided. 12% went to the BLM for a management fee. Okay, what are they? The Bureau of Land Management. Okay, so we're going to pay them for some management fees. The other 88% went to grazing advisory boards, and the grazing advisory board would then help the ranchers put in, say, a water improvement. We talked about maybe helping us with that type of deal, or a fence, or a corral, or some other improvement. So 88% of that money was supposed to come back to the ranchers. All right, and they did do this. In fact, in the past, we received some of that money to put in some pipes and so forth. But again, the BLM only got 12% of it, a very small amount of that. All right, now you can only pay the grazing fee if you had a contract with the Bureau of Land Management. All right, and when you signed the contract, it said that they have all control of management and they can change the rules and you can't do anything about it. It's a real one-sided contract, okay? And so when a rancher signs a contract, he literally is giving up his rights to manage his own land. Now, when we saw that it was evident, okay, what did we say? When there's a design, it becomes evident, okay, that their goal was to manage us out of business. And isn't that evident? All the other ranchers are gone here, okay? Isn't that evident? We said, we don't need your management anymore. We will manage our own ranch, okay? So we're not going to pay you a management fee any longer. We're not going to sign the contract with you. And as far as our improvements go, we'll stand on our own 2 feet and we'll pay our own bill. Now again, the Grazing Advisory Board was actually made up of ranchers. BLM had a seat, but they weren't the controlling interest. My father actually sat on the Grazing Advisory Board. Okay, so we were part of that group. But we're like, you know, we really don't need to be part of that group. We'll pay for our own improvements, and we'll manage our own ranch. And so because we had no contract with them any longer, number one, we couldn't pay the fee. We didn't want their management. And so when it comes down to what do we owe in grazing fees? Nothing, because we had no contract. They had no control to even graze it. So I hope that answers that question.